My name is Jim Ebdon. I'm currently mixing Maroon 5 and we're in Krakow in Poland, about to do a show. We're only using 56 inputs from the stage. Nothing real fancy, it's just a drums, two guitars, bass, keyboards, and a singer. So there's nothing unusual. We do use a little bit of Pro Tools with some backing vocals and maybe some percussion. That's about the only audio enhancement we use. The band play really well, and they're the most consistent band I've ever worked with, especially the drummer. He never misses a beat on a nightly basis. I mean, he's very particular. He plays exactly the same. So with regard to that, sound checks are non-existent. I record onto Pro Tools every night, the show the night before, and I play that back. That really is my sound check. Then I rely on the band's technical crew to play their instruments, and then I get the drum sound and just sort of tailor the sound to the room every day. But because they're so consistent, I don't need them to sound check. Adam's lead vocal, I have a Neve Portico 2 mic amp, which we've always used. We like the sound of that. It works well with his voice. Integrates perfectly with the console. I also use the console EQ, and I use the multi-band compressor on the console. So I've got a lot to play with his voice, and during the night I'll just tailor that and just make some minor tweaks. You know, some nights he'll come out and he'll sing loud. Other nights he's tired, so I've got to kind of be sympathetic to that. He doesn't have a lot of bottom end in his voice when he sings, so I like to add that when he's actually singing, and then of course I've got to take it out when he's talking because it just gets too boomy and muddy. Sometimes I'll just punch the EQ in for a talking EQ and then out again for the song. You know, because I have two EQs, I've got one on the mic pre and the one on the console. There are some quirks. You know, we have some percussion which are on tracks, which if you take away, you sort of miss, but if they're too loud, you go, oh no, that's not right. So they have to be at the right level and sunk into the mix and be part of the groove of the drummer. And of course the automation on the console, a lot of that has come from the studio, and it stems from a record, and you know, studio EQ is very different to live EQ, and things come out of the studio that are very compressed, got a lot of super high frequency on, and don't sound that natural, but they're great for the record. But in this scenario, it's too much. So I have to actually dumb them down, if you like, with EQ. So the snapshot functions are very useful for that, being able to really be particular with the EQ on some processed vocals and other stems that we've got on track. I use my my parallel compression with stems, and I'm using traditional auxes because that's what I'm used to, you know. So I have a bunch of auxes and then a bunch of stems. And what became very useful recently was using stems for record splits to send to a mobile truck. So I can just send all my vocals to one pair of stems and then all the guitars to another pair, etc., etc. And that was really easy for the record truck, just to put all their faders at 0, and there was my mix, and then they could manipulate that however they needed to for the sake of TV or something. I found I'm actually mixing here on these tiles here and just flipping between my banks as I would any other digital console. And here is stuff that I don't need to use. It's got my outputs on here, room mics, got my groups and some stems, so I can just keep an eye on them up there, and I'm moving faders here, and that for me works fine. I heard an SSL at a gig one night, and I found it to sound extremely open and natural with a lot of depth to it. I was looking for something else to try, and SSL were very kind and sent me one to my house, an L500, and I had it there for a couple of weeks and learned how it worked and found my way around it. You know, it's a little quirky, it's a little different, but every console has its own quirks and characteristics. It was easy to set up, and I found a workflow, because I think that's the most important thing with a digital console, is getting a workflow. And if you're used to one thing and you see another thing, it's like, oh shit, I can't get my head around that, you know. But until you actually sit and do it, it's very easy to get your head around. And a little muscle memory involved as well, but You know, I'm not choosing a console because it looks pretty or it's, you know, there's a ton of stuff on it that I'm probably never going to use. I'm choosing a console because of how it sounds, which is the most important thing for me, and then everything else will fit into place. I've been using it now for 6 to 8 months, and I just love the sound of it. There's a lot of headroom in the console. It's probably the most analog sounding digital console there is. And I love that. That's what I think a lot of us, I say us, sound engineers, me in particular, I like that old analog sound, but I love the digital part of it. I did a show, as an example, I did a show on a analog console a few months ago with the late Prince. I was really happy with the sound, and we did sound check, and then I went for the save button and there wasn't one. So this for me, the SSL is an analog console with a save button, which I think is fantastic. Yeah, I love the sound of the delays. I'm using stereo delays for guitar solos and the lead vocal. I've set up a tap delay on these user buttons, and it's the ping pong delay, the solid state logic ping pong delay. I mean, who would have thought, you know? I'm using a couple of the internal reverbs. I have one outboard reverb, which is something I'm just used to, and it's something I take with me. But I could do a show easily with the onboard reverbs. I mean, they sound fantastic. Another thing I'm really impressed with on this console is the all-pass filter. I still really don't know what it does, but I turn some knobs and it just, you know, works really well with my kick drums. I have 3 kick drum channels, a digital sample and 2 microphones. And obviously there's a time delay, so the input delay is very accurate, so I can delay the microphone by a couple of milliseconds. But it's still not quite right, and when you hit the phase reverse button on a channel, it's one wavelength, it's one delay. But with this, I can really pinpoint the 2 inputs and really get them aligned better than anything else. I don't know anything else that does that. Certainly not on an analog console. Maybe there's some digital plugins elsewhere, but this is a standard feature on this console. Is amazing. And just getting 2 guitar channels, 2 different microphones beautifully lined up, and the presence is incredible once you get them lined up properly is amazing. Sounds really good. I'm really impressed with that. I've noticed this console has a lot of headroom in it, and you can really gain it up, and I don't hear any distortion, but I do hear a character, and it's sort of hard to put your finger on. There is definitely a sound to it, which is nice. You know, again, it's sounding like an analog console. You know, I think in this digital age as well, I've always strived to make it sound analog. You know, and you get plugins, and okay, you get your analog tubes and your analog this, that, and the others, and it's like, well, it's not really analog still. It's a bunch of plugins trying to be analog. This, I found I don't need as many plugins anymore. The onboard compressors sound great, the gates work really well, the effects are very good. As I said, the delay is amazing. It just seems bigger, and fatter, and more open. But, you know, I'd tell anyone to go out and try it. You've got to go and try it. Why wouldn't you? I don't see why you wouldn't.